Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you. Let me mention that my mother, age 98, a constant companion of my father for 62 years, is here with us this evening. There were many years when she was here daily. It's not like that anymore, but she is certainly a veteran of this place. My brother and my sister, Virginia, we call her Ginger, and Johnny, actually named John, they are also both here. My brother lives here in Louisville. He's a musician, and what else should I say?
Security.
Yeah. He specializes in security. If you have security issues, he's the one. My sister lives in Germany. She is a nurse. And my wife is also here. There she is, Laura Helder. So it is a family event, and that's because this is related still to the Edwards Peacemaking Lecture, which was instituted in 1985 when my father retired after 27 years service as professor of New Testament here at Louisville Seminary. Okay, now we'll just go right ahead. This is what I will do today. Church in rural Nigeria, which is not exactly what I do in Nigeria, but it is something that I know enough about to give you, I would say, a decent presentation. I work actually for this church, the German-speaking congregation in Nigeria, and the sponsoring body in Germany is the Evangelical Church in Germany, Evangelische Kirche in Deutschland. That is a umbrella organization in which all of the 27 regional churches, either Lutheran or Reformed or Union, belong to. So that is a little bit of background on how I got to be there. I think you all might be willing to sing a song with me. And this is one from Nigeria in the language of Hausa, which is well known in many parts of Nigeria. And your part is this. Banara Budashi, which means no, nothing could do that. So you're going to try it now. Banara Budashi. Very good. I'll do this part up here and then off we go. Metsai Rabani Daukana Allah. Banara Budashi. Ko Chanani Ko Mutawa. Banara Budashi. Ko Takobi Ko Mashi. Banara Budashi. Metsai Rabani Daukana Allah. Banara Budashi. Very good. You see an English translation, not singable, but now you get an idea of where the song is coming from. What could separate me from the love of God? Nothing could do that. Not fear or anger, not suffering or death, not sword or spear, not an opposing army. Nothing could do that. That is a hymn of the EYN Church, the Ecclesia Yanoa in Nigeria, a rural church in Nigeria with which I have been associated for some 11 years. But let's first find out where we are. This is Nigeria. Excuse me, let me go back. That was a little bit quick. This is Nigeria in West African context. Here is Ghana, where our family lived and worked for 7 years. Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso. On this side, Cameroon, Central African Republic. You can see that Nigeria is the largest country in this area. And it is quite large. It compares roughly to Texas and New Mexico in size. That gives you an idea of the relation, much larger than the surrounding countries. So it does have a preeminent role in West Africa. It also has the largest economy in West Africa. But it is politically very difficult because it is a composite country made up of many different ethnic backgrounds. So that I would say on the whole it does not have the leadership capacity that its size and its population would lead you to think. But it is certainly a powerhouse in West Africa, and I would say an essential player there. If Nigeria would go down, then other countries probably would go down with it. So there's plenty of people, I would say, have good reason to say we have to hold Nigeria. Now, I work, just so you know where I'm coming from, in Lagos. That's a picture of our church there, Christ Church in Lagos. It's a nice building. You see, this is the tower, and this is the logo. So the logo relates to that. Okay. And this is Abuja, where I spend actually most of my time. And there we worship in a school. And there you see a typical congregation. My congregation is small in Abuja. Usually people are 10 to 15, maybe 20. I think the largest I ever had there for a normal service was 35. So talking about something small. And I live in Hope Eden, which is over here. I'll say more about that in a minute. But Hope Eden is outside of Abuja, 50 kilometers. So I have to drive in. But that means also that I'm living in a rural area, and that is how I happen to be able to address the topic this evening. All right, political structure I think is also important just to have a brief idea. There are 36 states, corresponding in many ways to the United States, a federation with a federal government, 36 states. And there are 6 regions in which they are located. You see them there with the different colors. And over here, over here you see their names, but that's not so important now. Then the Federal Capital Territory, where I live, is like the District of Columbia. The city of Abuja was built in the late 70s, early 80s. So it's in some ways very new, and it's an interesting place to live because people moved there from all over Nigeria. It is a kind of economic magnet, but it has no real ethnic identity of its own. It's also a composite city. And you might be familiar with Boko Haram. Just to give you an idea geographically, that movement is located by and large here in the eastern part of Borno State, bordering also into the neighboring states. This is Cameroon, this would be Chad, and over here is Niger. You see Boko Haram operating actually all around, but I just put this ellipse there. It's much smaller now than it was. At its height, 2014, it encompassed all of Borno State, part of Adamawa State, Yobe State, and Gombe State. It was an area larger than Belgium, but it's smaller now, but it's not over. Then this one also, the farmer-herdsman conflict, you may have heard less about that, but because its scope is in fact larger, it is, I would say, potentially the more dangerous conflict for Nigeria, though less well known outside of the country. This is essentially a conflict of lifestyle, sedentary farmers who are planting crops, and nomads who are driving cattle. It doesn't go well together. And it's tricky because it's not just anymore simple sustenance farmers and little boys driving cows with a stick. It's big landowners, agribusiness on the one hand, and the cattle generally are often owned also by very wealthy Nigerians who have given out that cattle by proxy. So it's a real battle of interests, not just that what you see. All right. This is important just to get an over idea of the background, or the religious background. The religious fault line since 1999, Islamic sectional law, the Sharia, is fully or partially binding in 12 northern Nigerian states. That is almost half of the country. And overall, the Muslim population is the majority, about 55%, 45% Christian. There is only an insignificant portion in Nigeria of people practicing traditional religion. Almost everyone has migrated to one of these two world religions, either Islam or Christianity. But on both sides, many faceted, not just one type of Islam, not just one type of Christianity. All right, a little bit of background. Yes, Boko Haram. You remember perhaps this image. Those are some of the Chibok girls who were abducted in 2014. Here, Michelle Obama, who at that time took that up and made that worldwide known, which I think was good. It would have been nice if we could say it's been cleared up, but it's not over. Just recently in this year, this man, Reverend Lawan Andimi, was abducted. This video was running on YouTube. You could look it up. It's still there, in fact, if you want to look for it this evening. He was speaking there to the president of his own church, that's the EYN church, appealing for support. It seemed at that time that perhaps Boko Haram would release him in return for a ransom paid, very high one, but he was executed in front of a running camera on the 20th of January 2020. That was a real shock, and even picked up by the World Council of Churches on their newsletter that they publish online daily. This is a picture of the widow, Mary Andimi, who also was willing to go public after the execution to say something about that. That I think was quite significant, because oftentimes the relatives are so frightened that they just want to withdraw. They don't want to be identified with what has happened. They don't want to take any risk. This was a very courageous effort on her part. He was also a significant Christian leader. He was the head person for the economic movement, the CAN, the Christian Association of Nigeria, in that area, and he was a pastor of the EYN church. So this was quite something. 2 weeks ago in Nigeria, we were called, all of the churches, to have a demonstration following worship where we just went around our church, wherever it was, and tried to call attention to the fact that it just can't go on like this. Okay. I would like to emphasize, however, because people get the wrong idea sometimes, I'm living actually a long way from that. This is Michika, where that abduction took place. I have visited Michika 2018. I was there. Things were a little bit safer at that time. And I even saw the church where he also worshiped. I was there for worship on Sunday morning, but I didn't meet him. But this is a long way from where I am. You fly there on the plane, you fly to Yola, you go up here on the car. In 2018 that was possible. I wanted to make another trip, 2019. The church advised me not to do it. They said, we don't want to take the risk. Okay. Now we're getting closer to where I live and what I do. Hope Eden, as you see, is a rather attractive area. There are lots of trees there. I like to get up in the morning and watch the birds with my binoculars if I have time. There are many beautiful birds, very colorful, big ones and small ones, and I get something out of that. Very quiet. The car traffic stops completely at dark, and there's been very peaceful nights there. I live in this house, and I've been there since January 2018. My wife comes to visit from time to time, but she's not there with me all the time. But we have a lot of contact using the electronic media that we have these days. It's not the same as being together, but it's gotten us through. In Hope Eden, there's a community school. There's no tuition charged. It's supposed to be for low-income children. And this is an important service for the surrounding community. And there's this community hall where I also hold worship services once a month. And then there's one of those worship services. That's Easter Sunday 2019. There you see that, at least in Hope Eden, there weren't many Germans, nor was I speaking in German. There's this woman here. She's married to a Nigerian. She's really German. She's the church musician. There's this woman here. She's a member of the council, Elizabeth. She's also married to a Nigerian Muslim. Her name is Omal. And somewhere on the picture must also be Annegret Kumbur, who owns the place, who built up the place, and so forth, also a German. There's German influence there. I wouldn't be there without that. But as you see, this place really is largely African in makeup. Now, we are walking from Hope Eden to Pasali. That's the neighboring village. And that would take you about 10 minutes. You would cross this river. There is a bridge. If you did that though in the dry season, you wouldn't need the bridge because the river dries up. This picture was taken 4 or 5 weeks ago when there was still water in the river. There it is from a distance. You see the rooftops. There you see 2 hills. We even call them mountains in that area. I've walked up both of them. You can do that in 3 or 4 hours. They're not as high as they might seem. It's something to do if you have an afternoon or a morning is better. So we're getting closer now. The income is mostly farming. These are banana trees. I'm not sure what he's harvesting there, but I think it's just what people call on the market vegetable leaves. And you cut them fresh and then you can put them in the soup. And I like the flavor of them, so I'm always looking for some to buy to flavor the soup. Cattle raising, but as I mentioned earlier, generally speaking by proxy. These people are tending these cattle, but they don't own these cattle. They're paid a penance, and when it comes time to market them, wealthy Nigerians pocket the money. It's not really a nice system, but that's the way the system works. But these people do that work anyway, because if they didn't do that, what would they do? Now we're going to see a little bit of this Pasali, which has 1,000 to 2,000 inhabitants. There's the local pharmacy. There's a little bit of what you can buy in there. It's not too much. I don't mean to say that this is all that the people could get. They can also go to the next town, which would be Kuche. There would be more. But this is what's there for them in their little village. Kuche is about 6-7 miles away. Remember, however, that nobody in Pasali owns a car. There they are preparing food, usually in the open. They're pounding yam, which is the African potato, a very large fruit. And that will be soft and kind of like mashed potatoes with a slightly different flavor when it's ready. They'll pound it probably for an hour. But that's the way food is prepared. This is a food cellar. If you see behind here, there's a little table where you can go in there and sit. She has a picture there of something, and probably spiced with ginger. That's her baby on her arm. She'll sell food to whoever happens to come by. This is a grocery. He sells most of what he's got through the window, and you can see it's not all that much, but he does have some eggs there and some crackers and a few other things. But these people usually don't buy much food anyway. They grow their food and then they store their food. So this is just for odd things that people might want in addition. Now the churches. There are 5 churches in Pasali. This is the Anglican Church. As far as I know, this was the first church to be here. It's belonging, of course, to the Anglican Communion. And it does have a sense of direction and purpose, which I would say typically for older churches established in the missionary movements of the 19th century are rather wordy. This is the church from the inside. It's actually very well appointed inside. These shutters with this cross let light in when they're all closed, and you can see everything is covered because there's always a lot of dust. And this is the mission statement or the vision statement or whatever. Bible-based, spiritually dynamic, united, disciplined, self-supporting, committed to pragmatic evangelism, social welfare, a church that epitomizes the genuine love of Christ. The Lutherans would have a similar type of statement. The Presbyterians also, there's a Presbyterian Church of Nigeria, founded by Scottish missionaries, as far as I know, not related to the Presbyterian Church USA, but these traditional churches who were brought to Nigeria, to all of West Africa, through the missionary movement of the 19th century, tend to work more or less like this. It's a broad scope, what in Ghana we call holistic mission or comprehensive mission, where you try to meet the needs of the total person, spiritual needs, but also physical needs. But most of the churches operating in Nigeria today don't work like that. This is the Evangelical Church Winning All, ECWA, usually just called ECWA. For a long time it ran by the name Evangelical Church of West Africa, but they've changed it now to this one, which gives, I would say, a clearer idea of what they're all about, winning all. This is their logo, Evangelical Church, winning all. And if I were to describe them, then I wouldn't use a long sentence like the Anglicans did. I would just use one word, evangelism. That's what it's about. It's about winning people for Christ. It's about growing. And that's what they do. Historically, they've come from the Sudan Interior Mission, a very large mission effort in all of West Africa in the 19th, early part of the 20th century. Okay? That's number 2. This is number 3. That's a newer church, as you can see. They don't have the doors and the windows yet. Those are holes. Deeper Life Bible Church. This is a Nigerian church that also is an offshoot of the Anglican Church, but no formal relation. The founder of the church was an Anglican minister. That's the connection. But he drew away, he founded his own movement, Deeper Life. That's the church on the inside. I find it interesting how clean it was inside, even though there was no door. That means that somebody's in there constantly cleaning up, chasing out the goats, and so forth. Yeah, I'm serious. It's a lot of hard work to keep a church that clean without doors and windows. So somebody takes this church very seriously, even though from the outside it looks rather rudimentary. This is a new church development. Deeper Life hasn't been there even 2 years yet. That structure started going up soon after I arrived last year. At first they were just worshiping in the open, then they had a roof. Now they have, since this picture was taken, which is only about 3 weeks old, they have put in doors and windows. So they're moving along. But at this time they didn't.
It's a dirt floor.
It's a dirt floor. But they have a little space up here in front where the pastor would stand and so forth. There's a demarcation there. That's their logo. These are now all nationally operating churches. In other words, the little building that you see in Pasili is not the whole story. I could show you much more elaborate buildings if I was here tonight to talk about urban church. But I'm talking about rural church. But it's important to realize that these churches are moving in here, that they see Pasili as an important site for new church development. So they've come. They're not just leaving it to the Anglicans. All right. I would say also their focus would be evangelical. There is certainly an emphasis on prayer, spiritual identity, but also a strong emphasis just on growth. Okay, now we get to the Redeemed Christian Church of God. This is a little bit older in this community, better established. The windows and the doors are already on. And that's the name, Redeemed Christian Church of God. There's their logo with this dove. So now we've definitely arrived at the Pentecostal movement. And this is a very powerful church in Nigeria. It started in the 1950s. And is in Nigeria, but also worldwide, one of the fastest growing churches that we have now. It is beyond Nigeria. It's very well known also in Britain. They also have churches in Germany and in other European cities. But generally speaking, in those countries, it's also Nigerian congregations. It's the Nigerians in Germany that are worshiping with the Redeemed Christian Church of God. Their structure is interesting. At this level, they expect the pastor to be tent making. He's not supposed to get a salary. And this is very important, and I would say a part of their success, because large Pentecostal churches in Nigeria often are paying their pastors fortunes. And this can be also, I would say, irritating. People outside of that movement, or even people within it, don't necessarily think that that's necessary for a pastor to be spoiled in that way. And the Redeemed Christian Church of God broke away from that and said, we're going to do it differently. We're going to do Pentecostal worship, but we're not going to emphasize pastoral wealth. We're going to limit that deliberately, and we're going to focus on growth. And their idea is that you shouldn't have to walk farther than 200 meters, that would be about like 200 yards, before you get to the next Redeemed Christian Church of God. So they have to have one in Pasali. Otherwise, the closest one would be in Dafara, which would be 3 miles away. That's too far. So you have to have one now in Pasali so people can come to it. There may be more Redeemed Christian Churches of God in Pasali as time goes on. It could be that one isn't enough. You have one at the north side of the village, another one at the south side of the village. I've never seen anything like the way they grow. Another principle, another reason they're able to do that is that they, generally speaking, divide as soon as they reach 100 members. Then some of those members are ready now to break off, to go out, to spearhead a new church community 200 yards away. It's quite a system. At the higher level, the level of church administration, they do have paid staff. Also the very large congregations that they have in the large cities like Lagos or Abuja, there they have also paid staff. I would say also you get to a point where the administration of it is simply not possible without paying staff. But at this level you can do that, and they are. I would say the focus here is on holiness. It's not so much on evangelism, though obviously they are interested in growth. But they're also very interested in living the proper life as a Christian. They'll be very specific on how you're supposed to dress going to church. That's not just up to you. That's going to be showing respect for the Lord. It refers more to women's dress than to men's dress. Women are not supposed to bare their shoulders. Things like that. But also men are expected to have decent attire. So this is, I would just say, an outward form of what they're going for, also inwardly, holiness. This is the most recent new church development. This went up only about 3 months ago. This is the Living Faith Church, also known as the Winners' Chapel. It's kind of confusing. It goes really by 2 names in Nigeria. And they started in just right before Easter. That is their logo. It's also Pentecostal. They've got this flame coming out here. And this is another very large church in Nigeria with millions of members. The sign, this is the sign, and this is a picture of the sign. But this is not the pastor here. This is the area supervisor, I guess you would say. But they've started up with a lot of energy. And I would say the focus of this church is prosperity. This is the heart of the health wealth gospel. And though you can pick that up also in the other churches, it's not as if ECWA would never talk about that, or the Redeemed Christian Church of God would never mention that. I would say they all touch on that in one way or another, but you get it in its most concentrated form perhaps here. It is direct expectation, if you are really worshiping right, then you will prosper. Good Calvinist, I would say, in some ways, that you should experience the grace of God also in material ways, if you're doing it right. The Protestant work ethic is coming out here. It's difficult in a situation where people really often are very, very poor. And hard to imagine really how it's going to work. But of course they have a hunger for not being so poor, and this does attract them. So, those are the 5 churches of Pasali. But now let me summarize. Would you like to come in?
How are people supposed to become prosperous? What are the tools around which very poor people...
To become what now?
Prosperous. How is a person to become prosperous in that construction?
It's difficult for me to answer that so specifically. I have the feeling that it's more based on feeling than on reality. I understand that a lot of it is the proximity to the pastor. The pastor should be well connected in some way, which may or may not be true. And be close to him should provide a kind of spiritual strength that would, I would say, lead to prosperity also outside of the worship experience. I have a question here.
I wanted to piggyback off of what you mentioned. Are you speaking of prosperity in regard to relationship and having an intimate relationship with people in the community, as opposed to being prosperous and having material goods?
I mean this in the material sense. They're talking about being wealthier than they were before. But I'm not sure that they're offering a scheme for that. I think it's more in terms of an experience that lends hope to the fact that it won't always be as hard for me as it is now. And it's very closely related to the pastor who somehow exudes that. And I think this is one reason why this church will pay its pastors more. That money comes really from the people, but the pastor becomes an example of the prosperity that the others, the members of the church, would also like to experience. I think that it works something like that.
How many people are in this community?
All right, now let me do this, and then that will be clear. So here is Pasile. I'm now going to summarize it for you. Summarization of Pasile. 1,000 to 2,000 inhabitants. It's a small place, really. There are no mosques. That is significant in Nigeria, because if you have a mosque, then you also have a kind of divided structure within the village. But here you're not competing with Islam. There are probably isolated Muslims living here, but if they want Muslim fellowship, they have to go to another village. So the predominant culture in the village is Christian. There are also no schools. There are no health services. There's no electricity. There are no sanitation facilities. But there are 5 Christian churches. This is really something. And sometimes I wonder what's going on here. I'll be a little bit critical now. I would think that among the 5, certainly the Anglicans, but why not also the others, could be showing more interest in developing Pasile in other ways, not only on Sunday morning, not only with some kind of spiritual development. But I don't see it happening, and I don't see it happening in many other villages either. The traditional churches who would have done more of that are on the wane. The growing churches are on the Evangelical and Pentecostal side. And it's really not their topic. Their topic is spiritual growth, evangelism, prosperity. I would like to touch on one other church. This one is a little bit farther. It's not represented in Pasile. We have to go over to Peggy, which is about 6 miles from where I live. This is a rather large and well-established church, as you can see. They didn't build it all together by themselves. There was a work group there from the United States. This is a Church of the Brethren church. The EYN is related to the Church of the Brethren. That is an Anabaptist church located mostly in Pennsylvania, of German descent. They all migrated to Germany in the 18th century, to the United States. And they did missionary work starting in 1923 in Nigeria.
Okay.
Yes, that's the Church of the Brethren. Their local name in Hausa, Ecclesia Yanua in Nigeria. That is the church that gave us the song we sang at the beginning. This church community is built on 600 internally displaced persons from the Chibok area. You remember Chibok, that's where the girls were from, the 270. These people, I mean, everybody was driven out of Chibok that didn't want to become a Boko Haram style Muslim. And these people came as a group and they took up residence there. They preferred that to living in a camp. They knew what they were talking about. If you went to a camp, there would be virtually no infrastructure. Peggy is better developed than Pasile. There are schools there that their children can attend. There's a market there, so the women would have some opportunity to market things. And so they chose to go there renting single rooms, usually for units of 10, 12 people. That's all they could pay for. But that's still where they wanted to live. And they built this church with the assistance of a work group and also financial assistance from the Church of the Brethren in the United States. And I spent a lot of time there, especially 2018, early part of 2019. That's the logo of that church. And it's striking to me how much energy they have in spite of the fact that they've really had it rough. The church was not finished on the outside, but there's no glass in these windows, and there was no floor. It was a dirt floor. And this was a huge program that they put on. It was late summer, August, September 2019, to have a cement floor. Every family was required to contribute 1 bag of cement. Surrounding churches were also called upon to submit at least 1 bag of cement. I think our church gave them about 20 bags of cement, but I don't mean to be bragging. That wasn't such a big deal for us. But it was an appeal, and we helped them. And they did all of that in 1 day, and the motto of the day was, "Come, let us rebuild." And there you see them working. "Come, let us rebuild." And there you see the women of the church. This is the pastor's wife, and there's their banner. And in spite of everything that they've experienced, they still can show this type of joy, and that is also a joy to my heart that they can do that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your concern. If you have a question or two, I'll be glad to take it, or we can sing once more. Let's do it, and then we have a question or two after that. Metzai Rabani Dalkan Na'ala Banabudashi Ko Tanani Ko Mutawa Banabudashi Ko Takobi Ko Mashi Banabudashi Metzai Rabani Dalkan Na'ala Banabudashi.
Awesome. Good job.